Thank you for calling TSN. All of our DJs are currently trying to make the VCR stop blinking 12. Please leave a message after the string of curses.
And then you stop blinking 12!
The Team Sportscast Network.
Is your team or company in need of a no-hassle, high-quality instant Ventrilo setup? Sounds nice, doesn't it? All Typefrag servers come with the highest quality audio codec, lightning-fast setup, and unheard-of customer service. With 6 different server locations, including Europe, you just simply can't ask for anything more. In the end, the price, performance, speed, and quality of Typefrag services is better than anything else available. Typefrag. www.typefrag.com. So what makes Insomnia 365 better than any other dedicated game server? With the fastest ping times in the US, Insomnia 365 servers are a top-rated network. With their own state-of-the-art data center, Insomnia 365 gives access to all of their supported games, rather than making you just pick one. And the use of Cortex, Insomnia's Gamers Control Panel. You have complete control over all of your games and even the server itself. With all these features and controls, Insomnia 365 is undoubtedly the best bang for your buck. Visit them today at www.insomnia365.com.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air. President Roosevelt has just announced.
Since the beta, people started using demo rushes and grenadiers and half tracks, and it seems to be pretty effective as a diversion.
Deutschland von 1 hat 3/4 die Waffen niedergelegt. Ich habe grundsätzlich immer erfüllt.
Mirror matches are a tricky thing. Lots of people do want the mirror matches, but there's their balance problems, you know? I mean, one of the things that I like to talk about...
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island.
This is Bridge 1 to TSN Central. Tales of Heroes is a go. Repeat, Tales of Heroes is a go. Yes, welcome. Welcome, I'm finishing up my research here at the last moment. Welcome to Tales of Heroes, ladies and gentlemen. This is your weekly Company of Heroes community show. We are all about giving you the discussion and information you want to hear about Company of Heroes. Great game if you're new to us. Stay tuned. We got 3 main segments to the show. We talk about the news in the first segment. We discuss what's up, and then we move on into the main topic discussion over the week's changes. You know, first we talk about balance, or we talk about particular map imbalances, or we talk about well, there's a lot of balance discussion, and every single one of my shows is failing me right now. But, we talk about all kinds of cool stuff. And then we go on to the final segment is the Unit of the Week. And so this week, our main topic of discussion is going to be finishing up the map rundowns. Last week we talked about the different maps, and we ran them down one by one by one, and we got about halfway through before we realized, oh crap, this is the longest show ever, we're going to have to break it up. So we split it up, and we're now moving on to the rest of the maps. We covered all the 1v1 maps and about half the 2v2 maps, I believe, last week. We're moving on to do the finish off the 2v2 maps, and then finish off the 1v1 I'm sorry, the 3v3s and the 4v4s right now. So that is coming up very shortly. But let me introduce myself and my co-host. I am Bridger from the Team Sportscast Network. Joining me tonight is my dedicated co-host, Vittensby. Vittensby, welcome to the program.
Always great to be here, and I'm extremely excited about finishing up these maps that we weren't able to complete last week, and also happy to feature a new friend of mine, Nystrom. He in a match this week. He's been annihilating all the top Axis players, and look forward to seeing how he performs in this game.
Yep, and thank you for reminding me. After the show, we will have, of course, a video replay review right here in the Team Sportscast Network, and that is going to be excellent. As you said, Bent Guru versus Nystrom on Angeville. A return to Angeville because our first one wasn't so great, but that's okay. We're moving on. We're getting the next one, and here is the rundown on the week's news. Let's jump right into it. Team Dignitas, this is the biggest news. Team Dignitas has set up an invite Company of Heroes tournament sponsored by QPad, which I coincidentally I am wearing a QPad shirt I got from one of the events I traveled to last year. Wow, that's kind of interesting. Also, simply leave a comment in the post on the Team Dignitas website. If you want to find that out, that's www.team-dignitas.org. But an easier way would simply be able to go to gamereplays.org or Planet Company of Heroes. Either of those places are great news sources, so you can get excellent information on it. Just scroll down the news a little bit. It'll be there. It'll be a 32-player tournament with 16 invites and 16 players drawn randomly and from the people who sign up. So that's a pretty cool system. I definitely like that. And they're going to play for some cool QPad prizes. QPad is the makers of really nice gaming mouse pads, including a limited edition Ghost Recon QPad, a copy of Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, the PC, and other QPad goodies. So that's all going to take place on Friday the 27th, which I believe is this Friday. Yes, this week. And you can look forward to seeing some of these matches replay reviewed in the future. We're definitely going to be looking at some of the best ones in this particular tournament. And it's really cool. They have it all happening in one night. And there's some really cool names signed up. I'm very happy to see Cepha is there. Let me see. Eye of the Storm is there. We covered him in one of our previous shows. We have Nystrom. I know I saw TV Dinner, I think. SMPL, I recognize him from the forums. Pillbots, for some reason, rings a bell, but I don't know why. Anyways, there's a bunch of good players signed up. Definitely going to be looking forward to seeing this one. Again, if you want to find out more information, go to teamdignitas.org, or that's a really hard thing to spell, so check it out at the Planet Company of Heroes, or gamereplays.org websites. They both have links to it. Now, something I didn't get to last week, and I did want to mention this, is my friend, the Good Evil, over at rtsgamejunkie.com, has a contest up. I don't even know if it's still running. Let me see if I can find this hour. Yeah. What you have to do is go to rtsgamejunkie.com, register for the site, and give basically post a link to the article that you like the best. What's your favorite article that he's ever written? And the winner will get a retail copy of Company of Heroes and a Company of Heroes mousepad. So he's got a little contest going over at rtsgamejunkie.com. And all you have to do to register is go over there, peruse the site, find your favorite article, and reply to that thread. And, with your favorite article, and you could win Company of Heroes again, and a mousepad for Company of Heroes. So that's pretty cool. So go on over, rtsgamejunkie.com. Meant to give that last week, but I forgot. Here's also another bit of news. Vittensby, I want to hear your comments. Movie Maker and Map Maker are rumored to be included in the next patch.
Well, I think that a lot of people are already using Fraps to do the Movie Maker if they want that, but I'm sure it'll have a lot of cool features that you can use, and it'll probably be easier to use than that other program that I just mentioned. As far as the Map Maker goes, I really think that's a great addition. That's probably a first step to getting some awesome, user-made or player-made, I should say, maps going, and that's what really I think is going to create a lot of longevity for the game and add a lot of new things to. Like, I know one person I read wants to do a World War II, base it on a World War II game, Company Heroes, and wants to make a World War I mod for it. So I don't know if the map maker is going to allow how detailed it'll be, but I know previous map makers allow you to edit unit stats and do things like that. So we'll see how that works out, but it's definitely a great addition to the community.
And here's another bit of good news in the next patch. I did notice this myself when I went to the Able Company site. They have a new interview up with one of the developers, and that's ablecompany.net. It's a Company of Heroes official community site, basically brought to you by THQ. And they have an interview. The question is, will we be able to see an upgraded replay menu that will allow rewinding, fast-forwarding, ability to view build orders, resources, etc.? What's supposed to be in a replay system. And the reply was, we'll be releasing an updated replay interface soon, hopefully in the next patch. So that is very good news, as I know a lot of people love to watch replays, and they have to use that sort of, weird, shunted-together system that somebody, put into an auto-exec file, and it's sort of okay, but it would be great if we could see more rather than just being able to fast forward. So definitely awesome news that is. And I think that's all the major news this week.
Well, there's one more thing on GameReplays.org. If you're a member, I'm not sure if guests can do this, but they have a gold replay vote going right now. And that's just a little something cool that you can do if you're part of the community on that site. So if you're not, go ahead and register. There's a lot of audio commentaries on there that myself, Ahenian, and a few other guys like to do. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And the forums are pretty active, and you get access to daily games that are posted on there, usually between top players. So it's a great site, maybe one of the best that's around right now.
Definitely one of the best.
Yeah, next to TGE's RTSGameJunkie.com, of course. But definitely go and register if you already haven't, and vote on the gold replay, which you can find in the.
What Vittensby means is vote for my gold replay.
No, my gold replay isn't up there, but the staff can still vote for the replay of the week, which
that's what he's talking
against,
about.
Mr. Overclock New York or something is on there. So, anyways,
right. So definitely, if you like Company of Heroes and you've never sat down and watched a replay, this game is absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous to watch these battles unfold and just take a moment to zoom in and look around at the different cinematic angles. You don't have to be conscious of what's going on. What should I click? It's really just relaxing. I mean, I sometimes do it. I got to eat something. I got to take a break. I can't start a game, but why don't I just go watch a replay? So GameReplays.org is one of the best places to find it, I am certain. But yeah, Vittensby posts a lot of audio commentaries there, and there's a lot of really good replays there. And that's actually where we might have to get some more of our stuff if people don't send in some replays. If you have a really, really good replay that had some really good back and forth, was a very close score between two really competent players, send it in. talesof@tsncentral.com. TALESOF at tsncentral.com. And also send any other feedback from the show there. That's the end of my little thing. Any other major news that we missed here? I don't think so, Vittensby.
No, I just want to say, definitely send in your replays. I want to see fresh replays from different players that I haven't looked at before. And it's getting hard to arrange these matches each week and get quality replays from it. And I think if the community can chip in, then for sure, we're going to have some great matches and perhaps get some undiscovered talent in the game on the show first. And it's always a great thrill to be on the show. I've been on it before, playing twice. So, go ahead and do that. It's great.
Yeah, the idea is we want to take. I'd rather not take replays off GameReplays.org because there's a chance that people have already watched them if they're on there. If they're really good ones, they're posted there. Somebody probably watched them, so it wouldn't be really new. So I'd like to get exclusive, special replays that nobody's seen before for the show here. One other thing I almost forgot to mention: GameSpot has a $1,000 tournament for Company of Heroes. I guess $600 for first place, second and third place get $300 and $100 respectively. So that takes place on Wednesday, registration will be opened on Wednesday, October 18th. So that was earlier this week. So there's a 64-player tournament over at GameSpot.com. That's kind of cool too. Great news. So moving on to this week in history. If I can find it, this week in history, actually today in history, in 1942, the Allies confer secretly about Operation Torch. In World War II, one of the first operations that the Americans were involved in was called Operation Torch. It was the recapturing of Africa from the Germans. The British had controlled most of Africa along with the French, but, of course, when France fell, the Vichy government basically, told all the French in Africa to, submit to the Germans. So the Germans took over the French-occupied portions of Africa, of North Africa, and they started attacking Egypt and the British holdings, and they were very successful. Rommel was, of course, got his main name from his African campaign known as the Desert Fox. And he was doing very well up until about the time that Operation Torch was launched and the Allies were able to recapture Africa with the help of new British forces coming from England as well as American forces coming fresh and pushing into North Africa. It's a very important campaign because if Egypt was to fall and the Germans were to get into Saudi Arabia and the oil-rich Middle East, it could have meant a very, very big problem for the Allies, but they were able to retake North Africa and secure the Middle East oil reserves for themselves. So very interesting section of history for you. Basically, it all started on October 22nd, 1942. There you go. This Week in History brought to you by... No. And now we go on to a very special portion of the show. This is a portion of the show that I just sort of made up, and I've just started using it. It's called the Bridger Rant. And it's when I get really pissed at something in Company of Heroes and I decide that it needs to be talked about in a very fun way. And that's called a Bridger Rant. Let's go at it right now. Here's the thing that I don't get. People come on the forums, and somebody says, well, riflemen are a little overpowered. And somebody else says, well, no, because the Flak Panzer's overpowered. And somebody else says, oh, you know what, that's balance. You've got the riflemen powered early, and you've got the Flak Panzer overpowered late game. That's called balance. And I call bullshit. That is not balance. That completely changes the concept of the game. The game is supposed to be you're both fighting on equal footing from the beginning to the end, trying to outsmart each other, trying to make the right decisions before your opponent does. That's called strategy, trying to outthink your opponent. It's not called, well, the Americans have to win before 10 minutes, and the Axis will win if the Americans don't win by 10 minutes? What if this is a time game now? If the Axis make it to Tier 4, the game's over? This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, and it has no place in a rational discussion. Early overpowered game and late overpowered game for different sides does not equal balance. It's the stupidest design idea I've ever heard of. I mean, short of its implementation in first-person shooters where you have the idea that one side has to accomplish a goal before a certain time limit, for example, stopwatch matches in Return to Castle Wolfenstein. That's an implemented design. It's supposed to happen that way, and it makes sense in that case. But that's not what an RTS is. There is no defender. There is no attacker. These are on equal footing. They're supposed to be equal and balanced. They're not supposed to be overpowered early and overpowered late. It's the stupidest concept I've ever heard, and that's about all I have to say about this topic. It's a short rant of the week this week, but it pisses me off. Vinsby, any comments?
Well, no comments on the rant, but I would say that the Allies have a slight advantage early on, and they need to solidify their gains. Otherwise, they're going to be in trouble against Axis. That once they hit Tier 3, start to get powerful units that counter the Allies' early game and can really damper the gains that you made. But yeah, that's it. Not getting into an argument because I pretty much agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure that there could be that the Allies are overpowered early game and the Axis are overpowered late game. We've almost said as much in the past, but that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's balanced on any measure of any scale. And that's all I wanted to say. So moving on to the middle section, the topic discussion of this week, which is, as we said, the basically... Point Du Hoc is the last one we left on, so where we got Rails of Metal, St. Hilaire, Vire River Valley, Hedgerow Siege, Hill 331, Montherme, Monterges Region, and Route N13. A lot of these are really great maps, and I'm really looking forward to discussing them. So we'll go over that right now. Jumping into Rails and Metal, actually, one of my most favorite maps. Let me turn the video over to live. There we go. So now you guys should be able to take a look at that. And this is basically a map that would be really great except for one little problem. And we're going to discuss it as we get into it here. But I love the layout. The layout is beautiful. And I like that it's different from other maps because it's a very elongated map. I mean, clearly it's similar to St. Hilaire, so you don't have a lot of space. It's a very concentrated front that you're fighting on, and that makes it different, and I think makes it, a different kind of game, and it's fun in a different kind of way. But my main argument, if the damn thing would actually load, what the hell? There we go. Then I would actually point out that in the middle of the map, you have 3 victory points, which is good, and you've got 2 fuel points, one on the left and one on the right, which is also good. And why is this taking 3 hours to load, is my question. Come on. Oh, I think Firefox has got all my RAM, because I've got about 6 windows open. That's probably it. I'll have to close that after. Moving on. Opening the actual thing here. Let us end the game and check out the map. Here we go. Tactical map. Okay. in the middle, where everything meets up here, you have a +10 over here, a +10 over here, which is good. You've got a +5 up here, +5 down here, pretty well balanced, but it all revolves around a +16 fuel point in the middle. And what I've come to discover, and what a lot of people around me are saying similarly, is that controlling this fuel point wins you the game. Because that's +16, or in most cases, if you put an OP on it, +26 fuel that your opponents don't get. There are only 4 other fuel points in this map, a +10 and a +5 on each side. Okay? So that +16 is exceedingly important. Unless that +16 changes hands a lot, the side that just continues to hold on to it is going to be able to pump out so many more tanks. Because not only is that +26 when it's got an OP on it for one person, that's actually +26 for, both people. So in effect, we're talking +52 fuel per minute. That's an extra stug every minute for whichever side holds it, or an extra Wolverine, almost. So it really makes a huge difference, a critical difference. If you hold that point the whole game, imagine, you'd have to be an idiot not to win that game if it extends to the point where you can get Stugs and Wolverines, or Stugs and Shermans. Am I going on a limb here, Vittensby? Am I crazy?
No, you're definitely not crazy. In fact, if I play this map as Allies or Axis, you should run your first Pioneer or Engineer over there just to cap it immediately, even though you don't have a link to it. So in case you lose it early on, that your opponent takes twice as long to actually cap it from you. It doesn't necessarily ruin the map, so to speak, if it goes back and forth. But if one side controls it for the entire time, then the game's going to be over pretty quickly. However, you can adapt your strategy around that. For instance, I was playing as Allies, and I went up against these Axis, and they didn't control that fuel point. And what they did was they didn't even go for it. They just pushed the sides and basically stayed in Tier 2. Got a bunch of AT guns everywhere. I mean, you couldn't even go anywhere. There was an AT gun everywhere. And got, Volksgrenadiers and Grenadiers with Panzerschrecks, etc., for anti-tank. Got a couple snipers and secured the left and right side of the map where all the munitions points are. So that you can actually kind of survive. And then they did a slow push to our base with that. And then after a while, they finally took the point from us. But the munitions are on the right and left side of the map, so you can't just focus on the center and pray that that's gonna win it for you. But it kind of does ruin the map. I wish that was a +5 or at most a +10 fuel. There's a couple of key buildings that I think really favor Axis early on. I think the map is probably an Axis-dominated map for a few reasons. In the center of the map, there's that little ledge right by the fuel, to the right of the fuel, and you can easily stick in a machine gun right up there, and it just covers the entire center. And that's a favorite for Axis to do early on. Also, south of that point, there's a building, and if Axis gets a machine gun in there, because of that rail line that goes right to the left of it, almost all the way down the map, it's extremely hard for the southern Allied player to even get out of his base from the southern exit. So it forces you to go through the northern exit. And if they get a machine gun in that building by the northern exit, by the +5 fuel, then you're completely locked in your base, pretty much, or have to go, all the way around in order to get it. Likewise, north of that fuel point, there's that damaged building. It's kind of close to that +5 munitions and the +10 munitions right by the victory point. I'd recommend getting an early HQ in there, actually, especially if you're rifle spamming. Because if Axis gets a machine gunner in there, then you can't cap the victory point, you can't cap that munitions point. So early machine guns on this map for Axis really dominates the Allied player, especially when they're trying to rifle spam until you get grenades. And if you're spending fuel on grenades, then you're not going to be getting quick vehicles or quick tanks. The one thing that's retarded about this map, and I use that term maybe a little bit too loosely, is if you look behind the northern Axis player's base, there's a strategic point, and then if you look south of the southern Allied player's base, there's a strategic point. Now, I guess it would be imbalanced if you had some kind of resource there, but it just makes no sense to even have a point there at all. I guess on rails and on Point 2 Hawk, you have that plus 16 fuel like we talked about last week behind the Allied base, but I just think that serves no function. In fact, most games, people don't even cap it in my experience. And that's pretty much my thoughts on the map. I think if they changed that plus 16 to maybe a plus 5 or something, that wasn't so valuable. But it would help with map balance a little bit and make for more interesting matches. But it does force you to be aggressive and make large pushes against the player that has it in the center. Unfortunately, it's really hard to flush someone out of the center for the reasons I already stated. Once they control it, especially if Axis gets.
I mean, look at there's fences all around that center. You've only got like 3 main entrances, and only 2 are accessible to any one side. So it's definitely a fortress of an area, especially with all that heavy cover. If the Allies were to take over it,
right? And but if you control the left and right, and you do that strategy that those Axis players did against myself, then you might have a decent chance doing that as well, considering you'd have 2 victory points instead of the players that are focusing on the center controlling 1. So it makes for interesting games, and the long distances between bases makes it, once you get a slight advantage, and that's why I recommended getting that forward HQ, because you can press your advantage a little bit easier, then it makes for interesting matches. It's definitely a great map. I like playing on it, irregardless of that plus 16 fuel. But yeah, if someone gets that early on, then they're going to get tanks way, way too fast.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and we talked about this a little bit last week, is the slippery slope effect as far as where resources are placed. If you place a lot of big resources in the middle, then it tends to mean that the team that gets ahead stays ahead. And it's very difficult for the other team to come back. But as you said, there's ways to compensate for that. And I've actually just started using a similar strategy to what you mentioned, is counting on the fact that your enemy is going to have more fuel than you and using it against them. For example, on Stursdorf, it's how I play my Axis game, and I'm probably giving away state secrets here, and somebody's going to shoot me, namely myself, when I'm done with this. But on Stursdorf, I count on the fact that I'm going to take the left side in the middle, and there's a plus 16 in the north that I'm not going to be able to defend very well. I'm going to harass it, but I'm not going to be able to hold it. I'm not going to be able to defend it. Instead, I get tons and tons of AT guns, and I stay in tier 2 for a lot longer, and because I know that he's going to be like, wow, I've got so much fuel, I'm going to spend everything on tanks. And if I got just tons of AT guns and he can't support them, then, he's in trouble. If I give him so much fuel that all his all his manpower he's spending on his tanks, then he's playing right into my hand, because I'm building AT guns and some grenadiers with Shreks, or some stormtroopers or something to that effect. So I try and fight with machine guns, AT guns, and grenadiers on that map. That's sort of my strategy, and I'm sure it's possible, especially on this map, for the similar strategy for the reasons that you mentioned. I think it's very important to eventually tech up, though, and try and trump them slowly and steadily, because obviously you're going to have some fuel income. It's just going to be reduced, so you're going to rely more heavily on anti-tank guns. So in that case, maybe it's not that big of a deal. But on a map like we were talking about last week, on Angeville, where you have all of the fuel located in the middle, that completely changes the equation, and that's a situation where the team that gets ahead, or the player that gets ahead, stays ahead, because in this map, you've still got 15 fuel on each side, not including the middle. Whereas on Angeville, if you lose the middle, you've only got 5 fuel income, and that's really pathetic, and so you're never going to come back. It's a huge problem, I think, with Angeville, that it just makes it so that if you ever lose momentum, if you ever lose both sides of the map, you're losing the game, period. And I just wanted to point out, I love the ambience of this map, and I never really took the time to take a look at it, but it's got a lot of gliders that have crashed, or crash-landed, or landed, and look at it, you can see the detail that they put in. It crashed into this house, you've got the wings down here, there's debris on the ground, and it finally landed up right here. And I think I've seen about 6 of these. Over here, we've got another one that crashed into these things, and over here is actually a parachute right next to it. And there's like trails of debris and all kinds of I've just been looking at this while you were talking, and it's the first time I've ever really taken a look at it. And just look at it. It's got trees knocked down and stuff all over here, so that's cool. I love the ambience of this map. That's my point.
Yeah, it's definitely a beautiful map, and it's fun to play on as well.
And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to be closing. There we go. Now we will load things much faster because I closed Firefox. So let's move on from Rails of Metal to St. Hilaire, a map that was in the beta, and I think still is a very fun map to play. What are your initial thoughts on St. Hilaire, Vittensby?
Well, when I played in the beta, and a couple of times I've played this in retail, I basically will MG spam as axis to the center, and my ally will bike spam along with me, and that gives a pretty good hold on the center. And once you do that, you can build a couple bunkers. I think this map is more or less a camp fest. Whoever makes it to the center and builds a bunker, and that's why I think it favors Axis, because they can build bunkers for pretty cheap, and then just throw a machine gun in there, and you get 360 field of fire. But I'm not going to even start moaning about about bunker problems and imbalances with that. But anyways, I think that it's not necessarily a bad idea for one allied player to go weapon support center, because there's a lot of there's the big urban area on the right side of the map, and just getting one machine gun in some of those buildings can make early Axis advantage turn into nothing, because if they don't get that plus 16, it's plus 16, right? No, it's a plus 10 fuel that's by that little ledge, then they're not going to have any kind of momentum past the first few minutes. So I think that the map might be fairly balanced, although I think Axis might get an early advantage if they can get that first MG quicker to the center. So a good strategy is to kind of just push, if your allies, just forget about the center, since it's not that important anyways. There's five victory points on this map. So if you don't control the center, and that usually if you don't control the center means you don't control the left victory point, and you just push straight and solid for the right where that urban area is, get an MG and rifle spam going, then I think that you can pretty much win the game by doing that. The thing I don't like about the map is that there's 5 victory points on it. I don't know if there was any way that they could have balanced it without those 5 points, with just leaving 3, considering the whole problem with the center that I mentioned. Once you solidify it, it's really pretty impossible to break someone out of that, at least early on. But I think that this is a better map for Annihilation games, just simply because 5 victory points, the clock ticks down really, really quickly, and it's always moving. There's never really a stalemate, considering there's an odd number of victory points. So if you're going to play it, I'd say play it on 1,000 points or Annihilate. But I do like the map layout, and this is one of the few maps that you can't really Grenadier Rush on, because the the machine gun nests pretty much cover the allied base, and it's just, you're walking into pretty much a death trap. And that's my thoughts on this map.
Yeah, I tend to agree about the 5 victory points making it count down a lot faster. I think that kind of changes the game balance a little bit, and I don't know if I like it for that reason. Certainly, I like the layout, and I think I've had a lot of fun games in this map, and this is actually one of the only maps I know that I believe this is still possible in the retail. I actually haven't played this map basically ever in the retail, because everybody got so burnt out of it in the beta. It was the only 2v2 map for a while. Yeah, I think it was the only 2v2. We got McEachin's War and Hill in a beta patch. So we were playing this and Simois, and that's all we were playing. And so I haven't really played this at all. But if I recall correctly, Vittensby, see if you can back me up on this. These big factories in the middle, if you put a headquarters in there, you can build tanks out of them, right? And vehicles?
Wow, I did not know that.
I know it was possible in the beta. I've done it before, but I think that nothing changed since the beta. Somebody in IRC is going to back me up on this.
I would doubt it, but I do know on what map is that? Route N13, I think. If there's that big building in the north, and if you get a forward HQ in there and you hit the retreat button anywhere near there, your units will actually retreat to that HQ. But that's the only nuance that I was really aware of with building forward HQs in certain types of buildings. But
yeah, that was definitely very interesting. But I know I've been able to do this in the beta. I turned it into a forward HQ, and because it was a factory building rather than any other kind of building, it allowed me to build. I think it allowed me to build the tanks and a few of the armored car, like the armored car, the half track, and the tanks, if I recall correctly. But I know I could build Shermans out of it because I did that when I was rushing into somebody's base. So it might might not be in retail, but I have no reason to think that they changed it at all. And I gotta mention one really nasty trick that is only available if you are on the Allied side with a weapon support center opening. If you look at the way this map is set up, like you said, that plus 10 fuel is extremely important because it's the only fuels in the map is the plus 10, 2 plus 10s on each side, and then the plus 5 in the middle. So, a really nasty trick that I saw someone do is, if you look, the plus 10 is on a weird little hook that you can't get to unless you go over towards the middle. So let's look at this on the Axis side here, and I've actually seen one thing that was used against me in the beta that really made me so frustrated, is a sniper was sent into this building right here, and it basically could fire all the way over to this fence. So I effectively could not move through any of this area, and then eventually he backed it up with a machine gun, and he was able to take this entire section from me. Now I'm a little bit more experienced, so I might have tried counter sniping him or something to that effect. I think they actually did, and I got screwed with a miss for some reason on my sniper. But it was really a nasty thing, and it's only possible because this stretch of water is significantly smaller width-wise than if we back up and look at the Allied component. I mean, look, it's significantly wider. This building is certainly a far cry away from this fence. There's no way a sniper in this building could guard all the way over to this fence. There's also a tall fence that would block it all the way up to here. So it's definitely a bit of a balance problem, but I mean, I don't think it's really game-changing because usually you can stop it, even if it happens. You can put a sniper nearby, cloaked, and wait until he shoots at one of your pioneers and take him out, but it's certainly annoying. That's what I'll say about that particular strategy.
One thing to note is that on this map, and I don't know if... Yeah, I think this is the only map, but there's water that you can actually walk through. I guess it's kind of like a flooded land or something, and it's not too deep. And that's another reason. If the water wasn't there, then basically it'd be easier to access the center. But yeah, it gets pretty hairy trying to get through that water. It slows down movement speed to probably around 25%. So just be careful.
Not only that, if you notice when you place the cursor over water that you can walk through like that, it turns into a red X, which means you take more damage rather than less. It's like anti-cover. It means you're more exposed than normal. Because normally when you're walking, it's assumed that you're going to be able to hide behind some grass or some bushes and be a little bit less visible and harder to hit. And when you're next to a tree, obviously you can hide behind the tree. And when you're next to a stone wall, you've got a lot of cover. But when you're out in the middle of a road, you've got anti-cover because there's no grass, there's no brush, there's nothing to hide behind, there's nothing to take cover in, and then when you're in water, it's the same way. So that's a pretty cool section of the map but the problem is, like you said, it slows you down so much that there's almost never any fighting over there, especially because there's almost no resources over there. I mean, each side has, I think that's a +5 down there, +5 munition points on the left. That's the only thing to fight for. There's 2 strategic points, and that's it. And then the middle.
Yep.
Oops, not exit to Windows, okay. Moving on to the next map, it is Vire River Valley. A big amount of controversy over Vire River Valley. There's a lot of people that dislike it because they call it a camp fest, and I would be one of those people, I guess. It's not always a camp fest. It can have some really good matches, but it can also turn into some of the worst stalemates in this game. Mostly, if neither side gets a foothold early in the game, they will be hard-pressed to move on any farther than they get originally. Especially, I don't know if it's probably more prone to getting big amounts of problems with noobs than it is with experienced players, because experienced players will probably be pressuring each other more, and they're going to have more of an ability to break through and deal with things. But certainly, there are 3 major choke points on this map that you have to move through. And somebody pointed out, well, isn't that water fordable the same way the water in the last one was? And that the answer is no. The only place the water is fordable is right here. And I think this map would really work if there were other sections that were fordable. For example, on the extreme left and extreme right of the map, or sorry, north and south, I guess, in this case, were fordable. I think that would work. Or if points in between the bridge and the middle were fordable, even if a little bit, it might work a little better. But as it stands, if one side destroys these bridges, or any of the sides, if the bridges get destroyed, you can easily, with some mortar crews, or a sniper and a bike, or any kind of combination of units of artillery or long-range units, you can keep these bridges destroyed. And that's a problem, because if you can keep both bridges destroyed, then that forces the enemy to go through water, which slows him down, across a narrow stretch, which makes it much easier to put AT guns, machine guns, anything you can count for. Not to mention, this is a little stretch that could be, of course, tank trapped or wired. So certainly, there's a lot of possibility for stalemate here. And because you can't repair these bridges without bringing down the force of God onto you in the form of any kind of artillery, be it mortar, off-map, on-map, or sniper, then, I mean, shit, what are you going to do? I mean, you're stuck going right through here. And one of the most crazy allied strategy in this map is to keep those bridges destroyed and build a load. I mean, a ton. A mother-ing load of howitzers back in your base. And you know what? Not even back in your base, on your side of the map, halfway, somewhere like, I don't know, right over here. Right in this little thing here. And there is nothing the Axis can do. They can't flank to try and go take them out. They can't get through the middle, because if they do, they're slowed down in the water, and the howitzers are just going to pound away at anything going through that water. You could get 8, 10, 15 howitzers there and start blowing away at their base, for God's sake. That is a major problem with this map. Aside from that, aside from these issues that make the game completely unplayable, it's extremely fun. And because if you notice that, of course, the other problem is that the map has 4 victory points, and 2 are on each side of the river. If there was one in the middle here, just one in the freaking middle, then it would work. Then one side would almost always control at least one victory point more than the other, and it wouldn't last for hours. Okay, so that I should qualify with saying. And aside from that, though, if the Axis players push up and take this side and put some kind of a beachhead here and make sure they hold on to their bridge, and the Allies push up onto their side and make sure they hold on to their bridge, or vice versa, they might even reverse the things, then the game can be really good. As long as the bridges can be repaired, then you're in good shape. But if you ever get to the point where the bridges are destroyed and your opponent is just preventing you from repairing those bridges, I mean, you might as well just quit now. That's my opinion. I really like the map if the bridges don't get really destroyed and stay destroyed for a long period of time. You can have a lot of fun with it. But I don't think it's a good map because it can be too gamey, too exploitable in that sense.
Well, you pretty much said everything that I was going to say on the map, including my thoughts about adding a victory point in the center, which might make this map a little bit more playable. One of the biggest problems with bridge maps is, especially if you're playing as allies, you can just set a demo charge on that bridge and then bring it down once you see that somebody's walking across. That might create some balance issues. You could lose quite a bit of your army since the bridge is pretty long. Yeah, it's definitely a campfest map. That water in the middle isn't really that long, but still, you can fortify it pretty easily. And like you said, if you don't get a foothold on the other side pretty early on, it gets kind of difficult. This is probably the only map that I can think of that howitzers and infantry company, really like double infantry company combo, would be extremely powerful. I played this map one time. I just refused to do it. I don't think it would be a fun map for me to play, and I think a lot of people probably feel the same way. I know in Rise of Legends they had Nohawk Crater, which was just the worst map ever, and this map kind of resembles it to a certain extent, and they basically took that map out of rotation for 1v1 play, and I think that this map's in a 2v2 rotation, so I'm pretty sure that should be taken out as well, or will be in the future.
Here's another thing that I think makes the map a little bit unbalanced, and I sort of just noticed, but I've kind of semi-known all along. If you look at the 3 choke points, the Allies always have a building overlooking each of their sides, and the Axis have nothing, no building. So take, for example, this is the Axis left side here, and there is no building that looks, I mean, I guess this building sort of but it's very damaged, so certainly a couple of engineers could take it out. But I don't think a machine gun team could actually reach all the way here. If they wanted to, the guys could, slip past the MG and come south and avoid it completely. So it doesn't completely block off. However, on the Allied side, if you put a machine gunner in this building, he's going to be able to take out anybody coming over here, I think. Maybe not. Maybe it's my imagination. But certainly, the second one, a machine gunner in this building, damn. I mean, he's going to be able to waste lots of stuff that's coming over here, or force it into the machine gunner that's over here. So, I mean, it's a very good positioning. And lastly, you have a machine gunner in this building here can overlook that. And look on the Axis side. You got nothing that can look at this bridge, and absolutely nothing that's over here. I mean, you got nothing. Does high ground count, to giving MGs more accuracy or damage? I don't think high ground gives you anything, does it?
No, I don't think so. But this
not
map
even
is
range,
unique.
which is unfortunate.
Yeah, this map is unique in the sense that it is a bridge map for 2v2, and that there aren't too many bridge maps, and this is probably the only map where bridges actually make a difference, except on Lyon, which no one plays on anyways. But I give kudos to Relic for creating this map, because it's good to have at least one map that is kind of like this. But for it to be in heavy rotation on ranked games, I don't know.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think if they made the middle point a little bit wider, gave it a victory point, and got rid of the water so that it wouldn't slow you down when you walked through it, I think that would make it fine. Because if that was the case, then the middle would not be quite so easy to defend. And there would be a lot more fighting going on over it, so it would not be real easy to build a bunch of tank traps, because there would always be somebody launching an attack to try and take the victory point back. And it would also make it so it's less stalled. The other thing is maybe make these side bridges a little bit longer, so that a bike and a sniper or a mortar couldn't just kill any engineers. Or maybe make it so that the engineers have to go into a little building in order to repair it. I don't know. Something that allows you to repair bridges without getting destroyed by any kind of artillery that's around, Make it so that you can repair the bridge from any point within this area, so that it's much harder to simply kill an engineer squad. Maybe if you're using like 6 engineers and you just repair it instantaneously, or maybe make it so it's harder to destroy. I don't know. Something to try and make it so that there's less likely a stalemate, I guess would be all I have to say. But I do like...
those are all good. Those are all good suggestions, and I pretty much thought of all of those while I was looking at this map and while I played on it before. I'm surprised that our heads clicked so much on what could be changed to make it a little bit better map.
All right, so moving on to I just looked at Hedgerow Siege. This is actually becoming one of my favorite maps for 3v3. I used to favor Hill, but I am really liking this one because it encourages a lot of combat on all sides, and I'll show you exactly why that is. Let's quit out here and view the battlefield. It encourages a lot of combat. It's a very sort of a big map with the bases spread out, so it's a little bit harder to help your teammates, and it's a lot like 3 1v1s going on, rather than concentrated team efforts like you'd see on Hill or sometimes on Montherme. But it's certainly possible to help especially the 2 guys on the side, the 2 wingmen helping the guy in the middle, or the middle guy helping the wingman. It's certainly still possible to do that. And here's the overview of the map, and as you can see, the middle, I actually love playing as one of the middle positions, because the middle is just so much fun to fight over. You've got a building over here, you get just a strategic point, but it's so important to have because it's a crossroad to anywhere you want to go. And it's right between the 2 victory points in the middle. So this is another 4 victory point map, and I think it plays really well. Specifically, you have a victory point between the 2 side players. Like, literally, 10 seconds outside of each other's base on both sides. And we can take a look at those right now, because it's really interesting, the positioning of these victory points. It's nothing quite like this in any other map that I know. Here you have an Axis base, a fuel point, and a victory point. I mean, he literally walks out of his base, past the protection of the bunker, walks across the road and he's into fight. He's into fighting. And it's same is true for the Allies. He walks across the road and boom, he's in a big field fighting. So, I mean, this is a really interesting map, and I really like the way that you can fight on the sides in this major brawl, because you're always fighting, because as soon as you leave your base, you're right into the combat. So retreating and coming back is really a lot of fun. On the same side on the Germans here, you walk out and look, oh, it's a victory point. And at the same time, you know, as the Allies, yeah, there's a victory point. Now, there's a small downside to this, is that you can basically mortar the heck out of people if you're inside your base. You can mortar these victory points to death. So, that encourages offensives and discourages defensives, which is good, in my opinion, because otherwise it might be a little bit too much of a camp fest. If you think about it, if one person gets control of it, he's right outside their base, he can prevent them from leaving. It's much harder to flank around the other side, but it's certainly still possible. But with mortars firing from your base, you certainly have a better chance of taking this back and forcing the enemy to retreat. And then in the middle, you have a very interesting dichotomy of the 2 points here, the Allied point, and then moving up into this very cover-filled center clearing, which is really fun to fight with. I find this is a big use of support units in this map. Anti-tank guns, mortars, and snipers all get big play along with machine gunners in this map. It's not a rifle spam map at all. It is not a Volks or Grenadier map. There's a lot of support units in this one, at least is the way I play it. Because of the, it's just, there's lots of small, tiny roads, and lots of places to set machine gunners up for choke points, and lots of places to put, a mortar that'll really give you a good advantage.
The left and right side of the map certainly favors the weapon support center opening as allies. It's pretty easy to lock down a point with early sniper and early machine gun just backing it up. But at the same time, Axis, I think, might have a slight advantage just because their machine guns have a little bit more range, and they can also build bikes from the same location. It gets pretty crazy if they start building bunkers there early on in that point, especially on the right. There's almost nothing you can do. Just a little side note on bunkers that I found out a couple days ago is that grenades do absolutely nothing to the units inside, and snipers miss every time. So your only real early counter to it is to get up a mortar, and at least on Angoville and perhaps this map, early bunkers just rule. So that's a good strategy you can use as Axis, and you definitely need to get an early mortar to flesh that out. If you do take the left or right victory point, and you do get a couple mortars in there, you can just shell the guy's base into a
Oh, that's a bad corollary to the one I was so happy about. Yikes!
And I still think it's better for the center player to Volk spam or rifle spam, respectively, because it'll allow you to cap points a little bit quicker, and it's that added mobility. And of course, it's always good to have riflemen supporting your allies who will probably go weapon support center. So this is a good map to armored car rush on also, since the bases are so close, and you can usually get an armored car out before they can get out their first Sturm armory unit. And it's a 4 victory point map, and it goes back and forth a lot, especially if there's breakthroughs on either sides, and it can also be kind of a stalemate for a little while, but it always makes for interesting games. I think the best strategy to do is just double team someone, plan on it right from the beginning, double team the right, double team the left, and then just go from there. Because I played with Cefa, and he was getting hardcore double teamed on the right, and he's one of the best rifle spammers around, but he just couldn't deal with all of the bikes. I think the guy had like 5 or 6 bikes that were there. It was pretty ridiculous, and a couple MGs supporting. So double teaming on this map is probably your best option, since there's not, once you cap the points around your base, if you're playing in the center, there's not really much to do. I mean, you can push for the other player's victory point, but who knows if that's really a good idea when you can just double team and solidify the right or the left victory point for sure. One thing that's interesting I just noticed in the center is it seems if the center where that strategic point is seems it would favor the allies, because those 3 wood blocks give heavy cover, and there's nothing really on the other side that compares to that from the Axis, and also the allies have a building that's there that's a little bit closer. But it would be hard to push on that victory point that the Axis have, because they also have a building there whereas the Allies don't really have a building by their victory point in the center. So,
well, they have
a
little tiny shack, but I don't know if it actually reaches all the way over to the... I think it might just barely reach that victory point.
Yeah, wood buildings don't really give much defensive bonuses, as Soldier told me a long time ago. But so if you're going to make your stand in the center as allies and then push from a point, it would have to be that strategic point, not necessarily your victory point. But yeah, again, just double teaming. And then if you look at the strategic map, on the right side where that low munitions point is, it's so far in the corner that there's no like +5 on it. I just thought that was maybe a little something interesting that needs to be kind of adjusted. But
wait,
yeah,
I
that's
can
my
see
thoughts
it.
on that.
Let me just... There, I can see it. I rotated the map all quirky. All right, let me fix this. There we go. So, yeah, and one thing actually I was just thinking about, the other thing that's really interesting on this map, but there's no major resource battles. I mean, if you look, you can't really take anything that is really near the middle. I mean, you've got the big strategic point in the middle that takes up a bunch of room. You got another strategic point over here. You got another strategic point over here. Another here. I mean, there's almost nothing in the middle to take. Almost every actual resource point is way back here next between two allied bases, or right in front of this allied base, similar on the Axis side, right next to them. And so there's very equal resources in this map in general. And I think that's one of the reasons I probably like it, is that you usually are fighting on equal footing. And, maybe you could steal this low fuel point, maybe you could steal this low fuel point, or this munitions point, or this munitions point, or this fuel point, this munitions point over here. You could definitely try and get those little tiny fuel points and try and harass them. But it's certainly a lot harder than, say, like we were just talking on Rails and Metal, holding 1+16 in the middle of the map and getting a huge advantage.
Right, it reminds me of Hill 331 a bit, except it doesn't have those annoying fuel points that if you lose early in the game, you're going to get tank rushed. And but we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, this map is definitely more fun in the sense that you have set resources from the beginning, and you got to make the most of what you have rather than making. So there's a lot of combat going on for the victory points as opposed to combat going on for the resource points. And that just makes for a more interesting game sometimes. And it's a little bit offbeat and different than, say, Montherme, where all the points are in the center, and that's what you're really fighting over more so than the victory points.
All right, speaking of Hill 331, we're moving on to that one right now, and it is certainly one of the 3v3 map that we had in the beta, so it's a very well-played map by a lot of the good players that have been playing since the beta. Certainly you and I, Vittensby, have been playing on this map for a long time, and it still holds up. I mean, it still is a good map. It is, been consistently my favorite 3v3 map because it's very balanced, very symmetrical, and it provides a very wide front, and yet at the same time only has certain choke points that you can go through. So it's a really interesting dichotomy there, that you can try and control certain areas at the same time as the fact that it's huge. I mean, it's on a diagonal, so you've got the widest possible area, frontal area for for a battle. At the same time, you have only 4 low fuel points usually per side. And a lot of times people OP those because there's no +10 in this map at all. So, but as you said, controlling one of these road fuel points is exceedingly important. Usually the Axis control this right-hand side, and usually the Allies control this left-hand side, simply because, as you can see, it's a little bit closer and easier to control. And that makes it a fairly even map, because even if you lose one of them, it's not a big deal. If you lose both of them, it's not quite as big a deal. It just means he's got 5 and you've got 3. You can still fight well with that, especially due to the confined nature of many parts of the map. The side over here, you've only got a certain areas where they can actually attack you from. Similar on this side, you have 1 or 2 or 3 different actual entrances. So there's certainly places you can put AT guns if you run out of fuel, comparatively. So that's what I think makes this map great, is the resource layout, with the exception of this +10 munitions point right next to the Allied base that has no equivalent on the Axis side. All the Axis munitions are +5, and the Allies have an extra +10, which means they actually have 8. Hang on. Plus 16. Yes, because if you put an OP on a plus 5, you'd get plus 8. And if you put an OP on a plus 10, you have a plus 16. So you certainly get a lot more for your money on a plus 10 than you do on a plus 5. It's actually more worthwhile to spend the 200 manpower on a medium or a high munitions point than it is on a low munitions point. Same for refuel. So certainly the Allies get a little bit more for their money over there. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but it's still an imbalance that should be fixed because, it's very simple. The map is very symmetrical in every other way except for this one anomaly. And, you've got a building here that can serve as a forward HQ. I'm sorry, not that one. That one's destroyed. Right over here, you have 2 buildings that can serve as forward HQs, and similarly, over here you have 2 buildings that can serve as forward HQs if required, and very good places for both Allies and Axis to launch attacks onto the middle, which I think similarly was very, very well done and actually looks like a really well-fought area. Everybody's been fighting over this particular chunk of land for a long time. You've got, improvised cover. You've got, piles of sticks right next to sandbags. You've got ammo boxes. You've got barbed wire and tank traps and everything in the middle that you would expect to see. Craters from, roads and paths that different things have made. So it looks really well done for ambience sake, that you're fighting over this thing that have been going back and forth for a long time, and the map is aptly named. And this is also, a really cool thing on the left and right hand side where you get to fight over these things. So I'm going to shut up and give Vittensby his chance to speak.
Well, I think early game there's 2 main strategies that you can go for. You can go for the fuel and then tech up to tanks and get a tank advantage, or you can go for the munitions point and the victory point, so a victory point advantage, or maybe get some munitions type units, or rely on sticky bombs and things like that to hold off the Axis tanks, or Panzerschrecks if you're playing as Axis. One of the things that probably shouldn't be on this map is that tank that's right next to the left strategic point from the center.
Oh yeah.
Axis tends to salvage that really early on. Good strategy is to send your first engineer or pioneer to garrison one of those buildings right by the fuel point, and then bring your MG or your MG42 or the Allied MG up into that building. I really wish those buildings weren't there, actually, after playing this map far too much in the beta. I mean, it's great because it allows you to hold it, and you get 360 fire from it. Although it does have a couple blind. There's I think one blind spot on each one. If you stand at a particular angle, you can just shoot it. But I think again, when you have those particular points or something that's making it easier to hold a point early on, then it might spoil the map a little bit. Another interesting thing is on the left side of the map by that fuel point, if you go down a little bit, there's that hill. You can build a bunker right at the bottom of that hill, that double-layered hill, and it'll pretty much cover the approach to that hill. Throw an MG in there, and then it'll cover the road behind it in case they sneak around. So you really got to pick your poison. Do you want the fuel or do you want the munitions points? If you get the munitions points on the side, you should always put an observation post on it. And this map, again, is kind of polarized in the sense that it's pretty well balanced, except for that plus 10, where there's nothing on the Axis side that is comparable to it. And it's really a rush to those middle fuel points in the early game, or if you know, a lot of the times, if I'm playing as Allies and I'm playing on the right position for Allies, I'll just rush to the victory point, because I know that unless I put my first engineer in that building, Axis is going to get an MG in there almost every time. So you either got to make your choice, like I said. But I'm a big fan of this map. Me, Dot, and Decoy played that hour and 40-minute long game where there was 200 tanks that were killed. So you can have some pretty intense battles. And the center, although it looks all important, it really isn't as important as some people might think. I mean, yeah, you can take that victory point and start the clock, but there is no strategic value really to holding the center. As far as there's no resource value to holding the center. It's just a strategic advantage so that your opponent can't fast deploy to the left or right side of the map. So don't always think that rushing to the center is the alternative, because I played games where the people just rush to the left or the right and double team one side and then gain this huge advantage, and I know Soldier was really good but he doesn't play anymore, and he was able to get to the... He would usually play the right side of the Axis spot or the right side of the Allied spot and get to their base in like 6 or 7 minutes with rifle spamming. So it's possible to be right at their front door pretty quickly, especially if you double team on this map, and that's also a viable strategy. But I think this map might be one of the more interesting maps as far as how it's laid out. I mean, Montherme is just this big urban combat zone. This is more wide open spaces in the center, and Hedgerow Siege kind of promotes this early fighting. So it's definitely different than the other ones, and this might be probably one of the best, if not the best, 3v3 map, in my opinion.
All right, so that rounds up the 3v3 maps, I believe. Oh, no, sorry, we're going on to Montherme right now, and then we'll be almost done here. Sorry this is so long, guys, but I want to get this all done here tonight, and then we can move on. Montherme is the last 3v3 map that we're talking about here. It's a very interesting map in that you've got 2 players at the top are fighting a team game, and then there's a pair of players at the bottom are basically fighting a 1v1, which is it's a really weird setup, but certainly the bottom 2 players can help each other out, I guess, and work together. But it's all separated by a big canal, and that makes it a sort of a turnoff to me, because it's less of a team game than it is almost a 1v1 in the bottom section of the map. But we'll take a look at it right now. I haven't played too many games on this. I've played 1 game in the lower right and 1 game in the top left position. So, the far right and the far left position. So let us take a quick look at the strategic map here, the tactical map, sorry. You've got, as I said, 2 players at the top, and 1 player on each side is at the bottom of the map, or the lower right section of the map. And, these 2 players are fighting over plus 10 and fuel and plus 5 munitions, plus a victory point right down here. But because there's a victory point right across these bridges, which I believe are destroyable, if I recall, those definitely look like destroyable ones. Actually, I think all the bridges in this map are probably destroyable. But if you consider the fact that these victory points are right across from each other, just barely across a stretch of bridge, then certainly the players are going to be fighting a lot between these 2. You're going to see a lot of helping between the bottom and the top. But look at all of the buildings and the positions you can put MGs in. It's just not a lot of area in the south section to fight in. It's still fun, and it's still good, but I don't know. It's a weird thing for me. I definitely like fighting at the top. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on at the top victory point, which is right here. The Allies have this sort of a interesting formation here. The Axis can come in. There's a lot of urban fighting going on in the middle here. I like this map again because it's not a slippery slope map. You have a lot of plus 5s in the middle and not any plus 10s or plus 16s. In fact, there's no plus 10s at all on this map, like Hill. So it's not a wildly swinging map. If one person starts to take control of the middle of the map, it's not a huge detriment. But there are a lot of plus 5s. So if one person starts to control the middle and the top here, it could get pretty bad pretty quickly, but it's right next to 2 players' bases on both sides, so it's probably not that big of a deal. Vittensby?
It's usually a 1v1 battle going on in the south, although it's, as the last time I played on this with some friends, the middle player on Axis decided to double team the player in the south and just overwhelm them really early on. Weapon Support Center is probably the best thing to do if you're playing as a Southern Allied player, so that you can rush to the center building and just throw down an early MG. It's also good just to throw your first engineer just to try to secure that center building as much as you can on the south. Double teaming is pretty popular on this map. The only interesting part of the map, besides the fact that it has bridges on it and that it's a 2v2 and a 1v1 usually, is that there's that strategic point right outside the Axis and Allies base, kind of towards the southern bridges. If you can take that point, you cut off all resources in the center unless they hold that, someone holds that munitions point, the low munitions point in the middle, and then that'll allow you to gain advantage from all the gains that you have. But I'm sorry, that's not accurate. what am I talking about? All right, scratch that. I'm allowed to make some mistakes every once in a while. Anyways, the important points on the map are the ones right outside of the strategic points outside the Axis and Allies base, and then that +5 low munitions point in the center. I think it's Axis' favored map just because there's so many buildings to put machine guns in early on, and you can really hamper anyone trying to do rifle spam, and it almost makes it impossible for you just to flush them out with a grenade without wasting all your munitions. And then by the time you get rid of those MGs, they're going to have Pumas and Stugs coming out, and you'll have nothing to counter it with because you'll have no munitions. By far the most important players are the top players, so in your team you should probably have the best player be at the top locations, just simply because there's tons of resources there. One thing I don't like about this map is if you look at the Allied base, there's this huge ramp that basically goes all the way from that strategic point in the south, and if you follow the ramp, starts to get a little forest, and there's more forest, and then there's this tiny little opening between these two forests, and if Axis can throw an early machine gun there after kind of beating you back a little bit from the top, there's really and put a sniper there and maybe a bike, there's really nothing that you can do to kind of flush them out. So I don't really like playing as allies in this map for that reason. It's just it makes it impossible to come out and come from different directions. And then if you look at the Axis side respectively, it's pretty much wide open with a lot of different avenues to approach all points of the map. But playing on the south is probably the most fun if you like 1v1s. If you're more of a team game player, then and you got like a 2v2 partner or something regular, then just go up in the north. I still think rifle spam's pretty strong in the north, but you probably will have to cut your losses and forget about upgrading grenades and maybe just get a sniper or two out. Although it costs more manpower, it costs less fuel. So you would be able to get out quick armor out faster. And the 2 victory points on the south are definitely interesting because if you have a sniper on either one of those bridges, you can kind of help out either side. And the action of the south.
But if you have a Goliath and that sniper stays on that bridge. Sorry, that was an evil laugh.
I'll trade 125 munitions for 340 manpower any day, personally.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh no, I mean like it's fine. Kill my sniper. That's cool. I'll just you just lost like all those munitions for 1 minute worth of manpower, and I'm sure it costs more. It took more time to get those munitions, but anyways, it's just a trade-off.
Oh, but it sounded evil.
Yeah, the south is actually not that important. I mean, there's only like 2 fuel points and one, what is that, +5 munitions. But if you can double team in the south and just throw an early MG into that building by the victory point in the middle and try to hold off the allies for a bit and knock out the southern player really early, then you're gonna be in good shape because you'll have control of 1 extra fuel than they will. And this is a good map for building early observation posts on fuel as well, even though they're only +5s, because early MGs just kind of hold people off for quite a while.
All right, and let us move on. There's not too much more to say about this map. It's not too unbalanced overall compared to some of the other ones we've been looking through here tonight. Last, we are on to the 4v4s, and sorry, I have to say, I don't really have anything too negative to say about these 4v4s. They're very cool, and I really like playing on them. I didn't like this one, the Monterges Region. I think it's supposed to be a region in Germany, I guess. The Rhine, the Ruhr, whatever. Oh, I've been talking for too long here. So, it's a factory, very urbanized area. There's lots of fighting around a specific urban encampment in the middle that has a lot of fuel. And there's also a lot of fighting around a specific urban encampment on the right-hand side that has a lot of munitions. So there's some really cool fights that go on in this game. It's a 5 victory point map as well. So let's take a look at the tactical map here. And I think it works really well. It's kind of a cool system. They have victory points at the top left, and then as you get to the middle, you've got in the middle, and then all the way down here. So usually, of course, the victory points at the far top left and top and right-hand side are going to retain in Allies and Axis control, respectively. It's going to be very difficult, but you can harass those points. It's certainly not impossible. In addition, the points, of course, right next to the Allied bases are probably going to stay in their control most of the time. The point on the left is probably going to shift the most. It's right in the middle. But certainly you could have a lot of shifting going on in the middle. But usually who controls the left-hand side is going to be who's drowning down the tickets. Now, as I mentioned, this map has +5 fuels, 2 of them, right in the middle, smack dab in the middle next to each other in this big urban encampment with giant buildings on all 3 sides that you can put machine guns in. And it's got, only limited areas of entrance, limited areas of exit. It is exceedingly, hard to get in. I mean, crud. It is a bitch of a time to crack this egg. If somebody gets in there early and starts setting stuff up, that is a fortress. And it's a very important part of the map to hold because it's right next to both victory points. So there is always fierce fighting going on around this. Usually the 2 middle players, or sometimes, the 3rd player on the far right will help out. But usually the 2 middle players will be fighting over that, and the 2nd middle player over here on the left will also be fighting over these points. So he'll usually spare his time between the 2. And the guy on the far right will fight over these munitions on the left, because there's +15 munitions over here on the left, as well as there's some munitions points and fuel points that are accessible if you push really hard on the right-hand side. So it's a very cool map. I don't have anything bad to say about it. I have played it on many occasions. I've played it from many different positions, and I've loved it every time.
Yeah, you would definitely think that this map would be a tank fest, and whoever could get out the tanks quicker is going to win, but it adds a lot of strategic options, especially if you control the munitions points on the right, and the fact that there's only +5 fuels on this map, and the key points are really in the center, creates a lot of action. Although if you do control the right side of the map with the munitions there, you can get quite a hefty advantage, especially if you're going armor company with Calliopes or Blitz with stormtroopers with Shreks, and it almost gives you an unlimited supply. That's a +25 munitions without observation posts just from those 3 points. So if you're playing the right side...
I said +15. I can't count. I knew that sounded lower than it should have been. I am just bereft at math. Go ahead.
If you're going as the far right Allied player or the far right Axis player, and you get best thing to do would be probably get Weapon Support Center or get a fast MG as Axis. And if you look, there's those 2 kind of lookout towers, and that really guards the ramp. And if you can get a machine gun in there early on and beat your opponent to it, then you're going to be in good shape. And then also there's that little fence to the right. The far right-hand pocket of that little enclosure. If you put some early barbed wire in there and then build tank traps, you can pretty much secure, or even sandbags, just to use a little sandblag.
There's a section at the top, too. That is definitely
sandblag. I keep on saying sandblag. Okay, sandbag exploit, as I'll put it, because you can't get around it if you put tank traps, and then behind the tank traps you put sandbags. Anyway, so and you can do that likewise in the north, and I had someone do that to me early on. They sent their first engineer or pioneer over there, just barbed wired the whole place off, and I couldn't even get in there to do anything. So it's a good idea to also rush the victory point, just so that, especially if you're playing a 500-point game, the victory point's in the far right-hand corners, just to get that clock ticking a little bit faster, and then focus your efforts on the center, because that fuel is really important. As well, and really the only victory point that stands directly in the middle of both players is the one that's on the far left. So I think this game kind of turns into a 2 simultaneous 2v2s, and then eventually you guys will kind of meet up in the center and fight off whatever's going on. It's good for at least, I think if one player on each side, of the 2v2, so to speak, goes Weapon Support Center and one gets a barracks, it's allies, that's probably your best bet, because mortars just do a world of better job against flushing out machine guns from those buildings in the center than an early sniper would. And other than that, let's see. Yeah, every point's a +5 except for those two +10 munitions. So don't there's 2 other +10 munitions, but that the right side of the map is equally as important as the center. So don't negate either one of those. If you want to negate something, negate the left-hand victory point, because you can always fight for that after you get an advantage in the center or on the right side.
All right, I think on this map, and probably on both of these gigantic maps, and even on Hill 331, because of the way it's so spread out, the Airborne Company is by far a lot more useful compared to how useful it is on some of the other maps. It's just so much more important to have your units drop in when your barracks is 2 minutes away. You know, if your barracks is 30 seconds away, it's not as huge of an advantage to have your units just suddenly drop in or have an AT gun suddenly appear on your flank in the middle of a battle. If you tried to build that AT gun, the battle would be over, and it would be, you know, the war would be over by the time it got to the battle site. So, I mean, Airborne Company is something I almost always go. If I'm allies, I almost always go Airborne Company on these big maps.
Yeah, massive airborne companies like in 3v3s, 3 airborne is actually a really strong combination. I think I said it before where, you know, oh, we're losing a little bit in infantry. Okay, everyone drop one squad of paratroopers over there. So then all of a sudden it's like, wow, 3 squads of paratroopers just showed up. Or on this map it's like, you know, oh, okay, we're going to drop 4 AT guns. And the problem is, maybe it's not a problem, but is that it's actually doable. Because you'll always have around 300 manpower sitting around for some kind of quick deployment, or at least you should as airborne. And I don't know, airborne is just a crazy combination if a lot of people would go it. But also, you know, armor company's pretty good, and infantry company might be decent on this map if you can build a couple howitzers in your base and just start shelling everywhere there's a front that develops. So it makes for some interesting combat, and it's pretty much focused kind of in the center. Although if you look in that building by the just to the right of the fuel point, the kind of middle fuel point, and it says the KLR on it. I know I've pointed that one out to you before. If you're playing as Axis, it'll fire north. But if you're playing as Allies and you get an MG in there, it won't fire south. So that's really an Axis-dominated building, and that's an important building to get an early machine gun in, just because you don't want Allies to have free reign walking down that road to your fuel point and that medium munitions point. It's a pretty nice building. That's probably the only real standout building on this map that you can garrison early, besides the ones that I already mentioned.
Now, I've already moved on, so they're looking at Route N13 right now as you're talking about that, but I know the one you're talking about. Lastly, we do have this one, Route N13, which is completely the opposite of the Monterges region, which is the one we were just looking at. Completely urbanized. This one is completely rural. It's all hedgerow country. And that's one of the reasons I like it, because this one is all about infantry. It's similar to Hedgerow Siege in that you have a lot of emphasis on infantry. There's a lot of emphasis on mortars and support units because of the way it's set up. There's no big open areas for riflemen and Volks and Grenadiers to just run around and take advantage of. So let's look at some of the more interesting parts of this map. Moving up to the north, this is the one we were talking about before, this gigantic mansion and estate on the north. Is he's got the little servants' quarters over here, and he's got some barn over here for some stuff, But I mean, this guy has got an estate. I mean, this. So what's interesting about this building is, as you pointed out to me, Vittensby, when you make this building into a headquarters, it will be the place all your units retreat to from that point on. I actually had a situation where I built a new squad of riflemen. And there was a lot of fighting going on in the center. And so I had to get my units up here. And I was like, what the heck do I do? And as I realized that, I was already setting this up to be my HQ. As soon as it finished, I was down here, and I told my squad, retreat. And they started retreating away from my HQ, all the way up to the top mansion. And it was just amazingly useful. And it's the only map that I've ever seen that happen on. I guess it has to be a specific type of building for that to happen. But the north point is important for one reason and one reason only, and that's this victory point right here. If you look at the big map, there's not much to take. Munitions points, 4 of them, they're +5s. But the real deal here is, from the north, you can do almost anything anything above this road is fair game from somebody that has an HQ in the north here. Because if you'll notice, while it looks like this is open territory, it's not. There's a hedgerow here that can only be destroyed by, I believe, a tank may be able to destroy it by attacking ground on that hedgerow, but it can also definitely be destroyed by a heavy crush tank. A Pershing or a Tiger can just blast right through that. But until that happens, you're down here, and the only way to get up here is to take the long road. So you go and we're there. But I mean, look at how much longer it takes to get all the way down here and up here rather than just going straight up here. So certainly controlling this top part, I think it's similar over here. The Axis have a similar destroyable hedgerow. It actually might be possible to destroy that hedgerow with fire, and I'd really like to try that sometime. But, yeah, I definitely need to try that. Have you ever tested that, Vinsby?
Yeah, I think we did that on this map, and it doesn't destroy the hedges.
That's right. That's unfortunate. But the way that it's set up, like I mentioned, this northern point can basically project power over this entire area, because the only ways of getting up here are, you know, these skinny little roads. I mean, look at this. Look at this little tiny, you know, sort of a weird hill on the right-hand side here that you have to kind of shuffle your way across to get up. And, you know, there's some other very interesting things going on over in the middle. There's always a lot of battle going on in the middle. Why don't you give your opinion on the rest of this map here, Vittensby?
All right. Well, as far as if you're thinking like, okay, well, this looks like a great map for, you know, artillery, like on-map howitzers and Nebelwerfers, and it actually kind of is. If you want to make a huge push, you can soften up an area because there's so many hedgerows and there's so many avenues. There's not that many avenues to approach an area, and it's more about you know, it's kind of choke points rather than a wide open area like some other maps are. That it's not necessarily a bad idea to get a howitzer or even God forbid a Nebelwerfer. If you're going to build those units in the north, you want to build it as close to those walls as possible, because if you build it too close to the center in the north, you won't even be able to touch the Axis base. But if you build it almost right along that wall, you can pretty much hit the Axis base if you're going howitzers. I like the layout of the map. It's definitely different than the other 4v4 map. I think this one might even be larger than the Montargis region, although that just might be me.
I think it's just the way it's oriented.
Yeah, I think that the routes probably make it seem that way. If you really want to secure the north and south, especially the north, because I usually play in the northern ally or Axis side, you always want to send your first engineer all the way up there, and then maybe build some barbed wire off. And you know, you can delete your own barbed wire, so don't hesitate to just, you know, block off the area completely, and then just bunker spam a bunch of mines if you're really concerned, or just get some tank traps and do the whole sandbag combo that I had mentioned earlier, which I hope will be fixed or changed. The 3 victory points make sure that this battle lasts a long time, even at 500 points. And just a little personal story. I played on my expert computer Smurf, and I lost 2 matches on Samoa in a row, and I hadn't lost a game in forever on quick match, and lost 2 in a row. Man, that was just devastating morale. And then I Grenadier rushed these 4 allied players. I destroyed 30 buildings that game. Just kept on reinforcing it. So it was great.
Wow.
It made for excellent screenshots. I actually got through my entire tree. Like, I got a Tiger Ace like at the 15-minute mark or something. It was ridiculous how much like buildings give you as far as experience. Just took out like all their bases one by one and boosted my morale. So if you're having, you know, a hard day in the moral story, if you're having a hard day in 1v1, don't you know, turn off the computer quite yet. Maybe switch to some team games and do some goofy strategies like Grenadier rushing and mass Nebelwerfers or mass howitzers.
Oh, mass Nebelwerfers in this map was funny as hell. I remember you had about 10 Nebelwerfers right here, and then all of a sudden somebody came through with, what was it, a Ranger squad, and obliterated them. This was after, though, they had set about 16 or 20 barrages at anything that attacked the middle. It was the most insane thing I've ever seen. And actually, when you get 10 of them together, they are sort of accurate.
Yeah, they certainly cover the area and actually do significant damage against tanks, especially if they're at level 3 veterancy, which is what my main strategy was. So if one player goes like mass artillery, mass naval warfares if you're playing as Axis, or mass howitzers if you're playing as allies, it's not necessarily a bad idea. Just make sure you spread them out, because those units appear on the map, and you don't want to have them all taken out because they're pretty vulnerable.
Yep, definitely. I believe that pretty much sums it up. I guess, the southern point is the biggest tank fest. If you're going to go tanks, if you're going to go armor company, or you're going to go tanks in general, you want to be on the southern portion here, because there's a lot more open territory for the most part. And I'd suggest, if you're one of the middle players, specifically the lower middle player, take control of this church and make it yours. Make it a headquarters, because this is a great place to project power, either up into the middle to help your friends in that section, or down into the southern portion to help your friends in that section. So either of the two middle players could certainly grab this church and make this sort of your Baton Rouge, make it your area of holding. That was the worst analogy I've ever made up. Okay, sorry. I put a couple of anti-tank guns in here, and it pretty much locks it down. I mean, you've got this area and you've got this area. You put a tank trap here, an anti-tank gun here, a tank gun here. You can pretty much lock it down and stop any kind of flanking maneuver if they try to come in, and then just make it where you keep all your infantry and repair them. So that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it's definitely, all the 4v4 maps are great. Probably some of the best maps that you're right now are 4v4 maps, and at least we have two of them to choose from, not just one, and I really think the 4v4 maps are exceptional, and they're a lot of fun. This one maybe more so than the other one in certain respects, because this is like 4-on-4, whereas Montargis tends to be 2-on-2.
Right, so favorite map 1v1, favorite map 2v2, favorite map 3v3, and favorite map 4v4, go.
Oh man, you go first. Let me exit and look at the list. Nothing right off my head.
Okay, 1v1, I think, despite the fact that it seems a little unbalanced, I like Stursdorf. I really like the way it's laid out, and I'm having fun doing my new strategy on it. But Simois is a close second. Angeville, I don't like it all, due to the fact, it's fun to play, but I don't like the mass of fuel sitting in the middle. It's just too slippery slope for me. It's too much. If you start losing, you're going to lose. For 2v2, Lorraine is very good. Rails and Metal is fun. Could use a little bit of a tweak. Make that +16 a +10, I think. So certainly Lorraine is my favorite. McGeckin's War is fun. I haven't played in a long time. I should play it more. McGeckin's War, something like that. I like Lorraine, though. I think it's the most balanced, most fun 2v2 map. 3v3... You got Hedgerow Siege, definitely one of my new favorites, and it's tied right up there with Hell 331. I can't pick between those two. They're both really great. 4v4, I like Route N13 more, just because I like the fact that there's not as much tank battles there. Tanks are still important, but they're not like the all-encompassing force that they are in other games. Monterges has some tanks, and it's not as huge a lot, but it is more tanky than Route N13.
Alrighty. I find that if you want a quicker match where you can dominate someone a lot easier, go on Angeville. Although my favorite would probably still be Simois, because I've been switching to that recently as opposed to playing Angeville exclusively on ladder, and I tend to get, no matter how skilled or, reasonable skill levels, I think that makes for the best 1v1 map. Stursdorf is just imbalanced. Lyon, it's not a ranked match, and I don't play on it. 2v2s, probably Lorraine used to be my favorite, although I kind of burned it out, just like I did McGeekin's War in the beta, so I might actually have to go for Rails and Metal on this one, just because Point Du Hawk's kind of imbalanced and St. Hilaire is a camp fest. I think Rails and Metal just adds a lot of strategic depth that you don't have in the other 2v2 maps, because of the everything being concentrated in the center of everything that's concentrated in the center that's important. And Vire River Valley I don't like, period. I don't like camp and choke point maps. 3v3 I'd still stick with Hill 331, just because I've had some great games on those maps and that map. And the other two, I'd probably put Montherme at second place and Hedgerow as my least favorite, just because those Hill and Montherme tend to be longer battles, whereas Hedgerow, it's like you get an advantage on those right and left victory points, and it's pretty hard to flush someone out of that, especially if Axis is the one that gets the advantage. It's 4v4s. I used to like Montargis a lot. I thought that was going to be like my favorite map of all time, but I'm leaning more towards Root right now. Maybe that's because I played Montargis so much in the early days of retail. So, yeah, I think that's my rundown.
Back in the early days of retail, all told a month and a half ago, I burned out. I played too many. Okay, moving on. It is the third segment of the show, the unit of the week. Thankfully, we've got a really fast one here tonight because we're freaking over time. Allied Engineer and Axis Pioneer are the two we're looking at right now. So the main difference between these two, and actually the only difference I can really find aside from their abilities, is the Allied Engineer has, of course, 3 squad members with an initial health of a total of 135. And the Axis Pioneers have 2 squad members with a total of 140. So you have 2 guys, each with 70 HP on the Axis side, and you have 165 total divided by 3 is 55. So each individual Allied soldier is actually weaker than each individual Axis soldier, if I understand these statistics correctly. That sort of tells me that it means if you run into an Allied Engineer squad that has 2 units and you have a Pioneer squad that has 2 units, the Pioneers should come out victorious, assuming that one isn't completely, obscenely damaged. The other thing is they both have similar firepower ratings. They both have 10%, 10%, 20%, and then 30% for their damage accuracy, and then they both have 5 for their damage rating. Believe they have both the same reload speed. The weird thing is, I think a lot of people have noticed this. Vitensby, have you seen the fact that engineers seem to get headshots a lot?
Oh man, I just hate it when I upgrade to the Flamer and then the Flamer guy bursts into flames and dies in like one hit. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. No, I never really noticed that. But didn't you know that Pioneers are just a little bit buff? You can kind of tell through that uniform if you zoom in enough. Then the Engineers are kind of little feeble guys. But no, I'm just kidding. But no, I didn't notice that.
I mean, it just seems like sometimes I'm watching my 2 units fight, and all of a sudden the Engineers will open up a burst, and my unit goes from, almost full health to boom, half health, because it instantly kills a guy. It just seems to die too fast sometimes, and I almost feel like it's a headshot. And I don't even know if there are headshots in the game, but it seems like it to me. And that's what's important. But yeah, so we do have a slight differences here. Let's talk about the abilities differences. The Axis have, of course, the repair ability. They both be able to repair units, which is a very important function of your peon units. The Axis cut barbed wires by simply escalating to tier 2 to skirmish phase, and allies have to spend, I believe, 50 munitions to upgrade. Is it 50 munitions? Yeah, it's 50 munitions to upgrade the wire cutters, right?
Yeah, I mean, allies definitely will get it a little bit quicker, and if you need it, then don't hesitate. I made a mistake on this one particular game I played where a guy barbed wired off the fuel immediately on Angoville, and I was kind of caught off guard by that, so I thought, all right, well, I'm not going to waste 50 munitions, but I think it's a good trade-off on certain maps, especially like Angoville with the 50 munitions, and then Axis, of course, has to spend fuel and manpower in order to get their barbed wire cutters, and it comes a little bit later than the Allied player would be able to get theirs. So, but again, Axis gets free barbed wire cutters, and that's kind of an advantage in itself, whereas Allies get it a little bit quicker, but have to spend the early munitions on it.
Certainly one thing that makes them very different is the Allied special ability is demolitions. They can research, I believe, it's another 50 munitions at the HQ to research demolitions, and once they have it, they can spend, I believe, another 50 munitions to demolition any building in the game, including bridges. So you can place demolitions on a building and then, go wherever you want. You can retreat, you can be completely cut off from that building, but I believe you still need a line of sight to detonate it. Is that the case?
Well, it's actually 100 manpower and 30 fuel to get the demolition.
Oh, okay,
charge
sorry,
upgrade.
I haven't used that ever, so.
And I don't think you need line of sight to do the to blow up the building. It's just this little button appears. I'd have to test it. I mean, in 1v1s, it's almost unheard of, but I know some people like to blow up buildings in team games so Axis doesn't go in there with machine guns again. But I still think that it's balanced because demolition charges kind of... if one demolition charge takes out your Wehrmacht, which makes sense, one takes out your Krieg Barracks, which doesn't make sense, and then one takes out your Sturm Armory. I didn't test the Panzer Command, but 50 munitions taking out your Sturm Armory, I mean, what's to stop a guy who went fast motor pool for just running into your base and with the first half track getting that upgrade and then, blowing up your Sturm? It's kind of, I don't know, I just have a problem with that, but... Yeah, it's interesting, the demolition charges, and it gives the Allies kind of an edge at certain points of the game where if you're really having a trouble, you can just demo a building. I wonder if all buildings only take one demo charge as far as neutral buildings, or if, like, say, the church on Samoa would take 2 or 3. I'd have to test that, but it definitely gives the Allies kind of a little bit of an advantage, especially if you just want to get rid of a building for some reason.
But, I mean, the thing I want to see more creative uses is a lot of people suggested, put 2 demolition charges on a road, for example, in Samoa. If you're holding the middle as allies and there's a chance, it's a close game, you might lose the middle, put a couple of demolition charges, right across the road from each other. Or, in a building that the enemy's going to be going by. And, wait until he comes to retake it. Fall back a little bit. And when his Tiger pulls up next to the building, boom! Half health gone. I'm told that those demolitions do a lot of damage to the units that are right around the building when it explodes. So that would be really kind of cool to figure out. But the Axis, comparatively, instead of getting demolitions, they get the salvage wreck ability, which is a really cool ability. And I think actually is better than demolitions because you have it all the time. I think actually you might even... No, I don't think you even need Tier 2. You just have it instantly. And so any wreck, any kind of destroyed vehicle in the game, you can move up to and just salvage munitions from it, which is really useful, especially considering the Axis have so much of a need for munitions compared to the Allies. And I want to write an article about that one of these days. I keep meaning to. So, I mean, that's the major differences between the two of them. We don't need to get into the defenses. We're already way over time. Any final words you want to talk about between these two guys?
Just engineers will beat pioneers if they're in equal cover every time at full health, pretty much. I mean, from what I've seen, and so just be wary about. That's another reason why allies have slight advantage early on is that if an engineer is going up against a pioneer, that's the engineer is going to pretty much win. So don't even bother trying to fight that battle unless you want to just delay them. And maybe one thing to note is if you're capping a point, I think one man of the squad won't fire. So if pioneers are going up against engineers that are for some reason still capping a point, then it might be worth fighting because you will probably be able to kill them. But just be wary of that early game difference, that even though the pioneers have 5 more health, that the engineers have 3 guns. So that's assumingly what I'm
actually
assuming
it's 15 more health total.
15?
The Axis have 70 per man. The Allies have 55 per man, but it comes out to the Allies having a total of 15 more total health.
Oh, the Allies have 15 more health?
Yes. They have 165 total, and the Allies have 140 total. Simply because they have more men, but each individual guy has a little bit less health, as I understand it.
I must have heard that wrong, or maybe you stated it wrong. I don't know.
I'm sorry. But the Axis actually cost less pop cap, too, which is probably an important thing to notice because that means they take up less upkeep.
Oh, yeah. Certainly in extended games where it's going back and forth and you make a slight gain on your opponent or whatever situation it is, it's a lot easier to spam pioneers to take over the map and repair your units than it is for allies to start spamming engineers because of the pop cap issues. It adds up real quickly.
Right, so definitely use your engineers to repair, because that is exceedingly one of the most important things to have. A lot of people are like, oh man, I got my engineers sitting around at the end of the game. You should never have your engineers sitting around. They should always be repairing your vehicles, because your vehicles should always need repairing. So anyways, that's the Pioneer and the Engineer, the major differences. We're going to talk about defenses and stuff in another show, perhaps next week, here on Tales of Heroes. And I just wanted to mention quickly our sponsors, typefrag.com, and the ever awesome Insomnia 365. If you play first-person shooters, go over to insomnia365.com. They are the best server providers you can find. They give you a dedicated box that you can do whatever you want with. You can put any game that you want in that box. They support a bunch of different games. If you're playing one night, you want to change it, it's no problem. You go to their Cortex management system, and you can change to any other game that you want to play. Battlefield one night, then Call of Duty 2 the next, and Counter-Strike the next, no problem. It's a great system. Insomnia365.com and Typefrag.com for your Ventrilo servers. So definitely check those out. And thank you for listening to Tales of Heroes number 6 here on the Team Sportscast Network. That is www.tsncentral.com, as well as the Tales of Heroes website is tales.tsncentral.com, tales.tsncentral.com. We got a lot of great articles on there, always worth checking out. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned if you're watching live, because we've got a great matchup coming for you on Angville here in just a few minutes. So stay tuned.
TSN, the Team Sportscast Network.
This broadcast is copyrighted 2006 by the Team Sportscast Network. Any copying, reproduction, redistribution, modification, rebroadcasting of any kind or any manner is expressly prohibited without the written permission of the Team Sportscast Network, LLC.